Well, howdy buckaroos, cowboys and cowgals. Here we are in June, and that means it's finally time to start June on the Range, that wonderful reading event created by Michael K. Vaughan, where we saddle up and read westerns and other kinds of related fiction or nonfiction, essays, books about the Old West, whatever you want to read, or novels, short stories, anything like that in the genre. Now, the only requirement is that you read one Western in the month. June on the Range has been running for several years now. It's one of the most popular BookTube events for read-alongs, I think, out there. And the only kind of request he puts out is that you try to read one Louis L'Amour book and one Zane Grey book, kind of the two kings of the Old West as far as fiction is concerned. You don't have to, just if you would like to try to. Now, I haven't been getting into Zane Grey yet myself, but I do like me some Louis L'Amour, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. But not Louis L'Amour's novels, but Louis L'Amour's collected short stories. So from about 2003 to 2009, Bantam Books, who put out all those great Louis L'Amour paperbacks, several which I have and that I like with the great covers, they put out in hardback these editions of the collected short stories of Louis L'Amour. Now, not all of them are Westerns, but 5 out of the 7 volumes in the set are Westerns, contain Western novellas, novelettes, short stories, mostly short stories, but some of them are longer works. They're very nicely made and put together with nice dust jackets and good binding. And this one's a little bit creased here and there, but you know, nice looking hardcover. And I have the first 4 volumes. I just ordered volume 2. I realized I didn't have volume 2. I thought I was missing a different volume, and I thought it was about time I ordered another volume of these stories. I've read some of the ones from volume 1. Some of those stories, those were excellent stories, a lot of really good stories in there, and I'll talk about them in a moment. I've had volumes 1, 3, and 4 for quite some time, and I still need to get volumes 5, 6, and 7. That's a lot of stories that Louis L'Amour wrote, and that's not even counting his 120 or so novels or so that he wrote. So let me talk a little bit about these editions. The first 3 are all Western stories, or as they are termed here, collected short stories of Louis L'Amour, Volume 1, The Frontier Stories, and some kind of cool little art there, even though it's quite small. And I'll just read you a little bit about the kind of stories that are in here, right? And of course, a little blurb. There's the usual, kind of fan wank to big up Mr. L'Amour, but he was, at the time, for quite a while, for several decades, one of the most widely read and popular writers out there. His books were ubiquitous everywhere. Truck stops, bookstores, new and used, anywhere you would go, thrift stores, etc., you would find them. So no one more vividly captures the rugged majesty and enduring spirit of the American West than Louis L'Amour. Now, drawn together in this handsome keepsake volume are 35 classic frontier tales from the legendary master of the genre. The first anthology in a series that will stand as the definitive collection of L'Amour's short stories. Now, I should say that these hardcovers, you can get them still at least used on Amazon Marketplace, and I think some are even still available in new copies. But Bantam went on and released these in paperback, mass market paperback. I prefer to get the hardbacks, though. I think I found the first couple at a half-price books. In fact, there's a half-price books bookmark still in, let me get it the right way up, still in this 3rd volume that I found in Seattle, I believe, in one of the half-price books, maybe in South Center, near the SeaTac airport, when I was shopping there with a friend. Anyway, they are available in other editions, but these are the ones I recommend, especially if you like short stories and you want just a little bite-sized taste of Western adventure here and there. These are really good reads. There's a lot of variety in them as well, and they're not, like I said, they're not all Western stories. I'll talk about my big, thick volume 4, the adventure stories, in a moment. But let me just talk about in this first volume, okay, some of the stories in their general one-line synopses, just some of them. These stories bring us face to face with heroism in unexpected places, in the form of a single mother facing down an Apache war party, or a whiskey-soaked drunk who wakes to find he's the only hope for a town surrounded by marauders. They reveal the many faces of justice, from the fitting punishment a prospector left to die in the desert exacts on his betrayers, to the gauntlet of double and triple crosses 4 escaped convicts must run in a hunt for gold that will leave only one of them alive. Here, too, are stories of faith and mysticism, as a reverend comes to a small town to bring something more than just salvation, and a desperately wounded man stranded in the wilderness finds his sole companion in a spirit of the silent hills. And as always, there is pure adventure, from a woman whose future hangs on the outcome of a card game, to a down-on-his-luck actor who impersonates a legendary gunfighter in a one-night stand he prays he'll live to tell about. Brimming with history, unforgettable characters, and the pride of place that his readers have come to expect, this first volume of the collected short stories of Louis L'Amour is a testament to the nobility and resilience of the American spirit, and a lasting tribute to one of the greatest short story writers of all time. Now, again, a lot of people who read Louis L'Amour think of him more as a novelist, and of course he was. He wrote, like I said, over 100 novels, but he published a lot of short stories too, and many of those short stories were collected in book form, which leads me to Volume 2, the one that I just got recently from Amazon Japan, actually. The collected short stories of Louis L'Amour, or Louis L'Amour, or Lou L'Amour. One of my co-hosts here, Thomas McNulty, a Western writer of note himself, actually sent an inquiry to an email, I guess, to Beau L'Amour, Louis L'Amour's son, to say, did he actually call or go by Louis? Did he go by Louis? And Beau, Louis L'Amour's son, wrote back and said, well, he didn't mind Louis, and he didn't mind people calling him Louis, but his usually was called Lou by his friends. So I thought that was a really neat piece of information, that some primary research that Thomas McNulty did. Thomas McNulty has a great channel. I recommend everyone go check his channel out. He's one of the co-hosts, Riding the Trail, one of the deputies here during this BookTube event, June on the Range. Anyway, as you'll see, there's a slight color gradation for these covers. They're very similar look and livery. We have the first volume is, got this kind of deep wine red maroon kind of color, and this one has a blue and like navy blue cover. Now this, I think I probably paid about $15 for this. It's got a little ding on the front, but otherwise it's in good shape. The dust jacket is fine. And that's just the dust jacket. The book itself is really well put together. And of course, comes with a list of many of L'Amour's books. So last year's June on the Range 2025, I reviewed a couple of Louis L'Amour books. One was a novel, and the Key Lock Man, and the other was a short story collection, Baudry, about a Texas Ranger, and these were all short stories. I believe there are about 7 short stories in here. I read this book, reviewed it on the channel, really, really enjoyed it. Baudry's quite or Baudry, or however you want to pronounce his name, quite a character, quite a tough young marshal working on his own to look into what were a lot of mysteries, really, kind of Western mysteries where you weren't 100% sure who the culprit was of a particular dastardly deed happening in the Old West until towards the end of the story. They always had plenty of fights, gunfights, fist fights. Almost all of Louis L'Amour's stories are pack in the action. He's an expert hand at action writing, very clear and easy to follow. A lot of fist fights. Louis L'Amour himself was I believe, a bantamweight boxer in his youth, so he knows how to describe fights very well. He describes, gunfights and chases and, escapes and things of that nature very well as the sense of the wilderness and the weather and the strong character of the people that carved out a living there in the harsh wilderness, including Native Americans. Anyway, back to Baudry. Baudry, there was a second collection of short stories published in Bantam paperback called Baudry's Law. Now, all of the Baudry stories are in this volume 2. They're not all in the same order that they were in the paperbacks, but I believe there's 10 in the sequel and there's 7 in the first one, so that's like 17 short stories. So a big chunk of this one is about Chick Baudry, the Texas Ranger. So this is also Frontier Stories. This was published in 2004, the first volume in 2003. And I'll just read a little bit of description of what's in here as well. The short stories of Ludamore are the heart and soul of his life's work. These frontier tales go far beyond the typical Western to embrace the universal themes of heroism, honor, sacrifice, and survival that Lamore made uniquely his own. Inside, you'll find adventures in individual courage, like that of a young man sent alone into a blizzard with just rope and a branding iron to face a deadly stampede, or a lawman who finds the bullet-riddled body of an infamous Mexican bandit and knows duty demands he tracks down a far more dangerous predator. Here are the stories that make men legends, from a mining town stalked by a hidden killer to a rancher mercilessly hunted by enemies who will stop at nothing until he faces them. Here, too, are dramatic moments of truth that can change a life or end it in a heartbeat. From a rainstorm that flushes out a killer among 6 men and a young woman who take cover in a shanty, to the hardened frontier fighter who comes to rest at a place called Horse Heaven, where there's one last death to avenge. Featuring Lou Lamore's signature stories of Texas Ranger Chick Bowdry, this collection captures men and women on the crossroads of friendship and suspicion, trust and betrayal, a handshake, or a gun. Now we come to the third volume, the third collection of his short stories, and these are also frontier stories. Now I know this one with its nice green dust jacket, but the similar livery with the nice little bit of art on the front there. The volume 3 came out in 2005, and I know I picked this one up in the half-price books because I have the half-price bookmark in there. And this one, open this volume anywhere, and you'll discover classic stories you'll never forget, like that of the man who finds a gruesome mystery at the site where a friend's ranch has vanished into thin air, or the one about the soft-spoken young suitor accused of cowardice who proves his courage when the guns are against him, without firing a shot. Shades of Destry. Destry Rides Again, if you've seen that movie or familiar with that movie. Very different from the original novel, I think. You'll read stories of ordinary people faced with extraordinary circumstances, from the drifter who poses as a murdered man to solve a mystery, to the grizzled recluse who protects a runaway from a brutal, quote-unquote, guardian with the law on his side. Whether following the exploits of a couple taking refuge in a cabin with a group of outlaws who don't intend to let them see sunrise, or a man on horseback battling sleeplessness, Indians, and a cold-blooded killer in a life-and-death race through a harsh wilderness, these gripping tales all have one thing in common: you won't be able to put them down until the last page. All right, now those first three are Western stories, and so are very fitting for June on the Range. The next one I want to show you does not have anything to do with Westerns, but Louis L'Amour didn't just write Westerns. He wrote all kinds of fiction for the short story and pulp market, and he also wrote some books, especially later in his life, that were more historical adventures or sweeping kind of romance, swashbuckling, tales of piracy and adventures at sea, etc. And this one, and it's at least is thick, double thickness, or 200 or 300 pages more than the others. This one is the collected short stories of Louis L'Amour, the adventure stories. And then you'll see a tramp steamer in the picture there. Now, this was the very first volume I picked up because I had read some of Louis L'Amour's adventure fiction and I loved it, and I wanted to get this collection. So these ones are really fun, and this is a whopper this is a chunker. This goes over to like 660 or so pages and packs in the stories. Okay, so the fourth volume of Louis L'Amour's collected short stories contains all of his masterful tales of adventure, including, for the first time in print in more than 70 years, his first story ever to be published. This unique collection is guaranteed to thrill and delight readers again and again, proving why Louis L'Amour remains America's favorite storyteller. Well, perhaps not these days, but he was for many decades. Perhaps never before has a single volume contained so many breathtaking thrills, from the down-on-his-luck fortune hunter who risks everything to save a married couple in the wilds of Borneo, to the mysterious hero aboard a downed airliner dangling 600 feet above certain doom. You'll trek across the harsh steppes of East Asia with an American widow and her young son, and you'll relive a harrowing tale of survival at sea against thirst, madness, and the elements as a common seaman redefines extraordinary courage as simply doing his job. Whether joining an American captain navigating a cargo ship through pirate-infested Japanese-controlled waters during World War II, or marveling at the resourcefulness of a young woman pushed to the limits of endurance as she flees a killer through a primeval forest. These adrenaline-laced tales of mystery, suspense, murder, and survival will keep your heart pounding long after the final page. From stories numbering just a few intense pages to novella-length works, the tales in this action-packed anthology bear all the trademarks of the master's touch. The historical accuracy, memorable characters, and timeless themes that have earned Louis L'Amour his unique place among American writers. Now, I've read a lot of the stories in here. Some of these involve a character called Pongo Jim Mayo, who I believe is an Australian merchant captain of a vessel that gets involved in all sorts of scrapes in World War II. They kind of have these separated in little sections. You'll see here, beyond the Great Snow Mountains. I think these are more just kind of adventure tales, and we get into some kind of like Tales of the Gold Monkey, some guy who flies a kind of seaplane around and has various adventures, a captain of a merchant vessel, Pongo Jim Mayo, like I mentioned. Lots and lots of very cool tales, including some World War II adventure tales, etc. Highly recommend that volume if you can track it down. Like I said, all of these, as far as I'm aware, have been put out in mass market paperback and split volumes. Now, I only have the first 4 volumes. There were 3 more. So volume 5, the adventure stories came out in 2006. In 2007, volume 5, the Frontier Stories, another volume of Frontier Stories came out. In 2008, and this is another one I really want to get, this is the Crime Stories. Now, this collects all of Louis L'Amour's boxing stories, crime stories, and other kind of noir kind of tales. I know L'Amour put out a collection in paperback called The Hills of Homicide, which are his private eye stories. And those might not be up there with the best of his Westerns, but they're pretty cool stories. And so I really want to get that volume 6. And then finally, volume 7 came out in 2009. That was the last one that published the very last gasp, I guess, of his stories. I'm sure their quality is still high. And that was also Frontier Stories. So one of these days, hopefully this summer, when I go back to the States on my upcoming trip, I'll be able to track down those remaining 3 volumes. And I'll be able to complete my set of these very cool hardback editions of Louis L'Amour's. See if I can hold these up here. They're of these Louis L'Amour short story hardback volumes. They're pretty hard to hold all together. Anyway, just a little something, a little taste of something different for June on the Range. I know a lot of people are reading short stories, maybe in some anthologies, but these Louis L'Amour collections are really cool. I know I've read a handful of these Frontier stories, including the very first story, The Gift of Cochise, which I remember being a real banger. And again, really nicely put together editions. So I'm going to read a couple of these short stories in a couple of these volumes, including the volume that I just got, some Chick Beaudry stories from the second collection, Beaudry's Law, that I didn't read before, or haven't read before, for this June on the Range this month, as well as some novels. I'm halfway through, or a little more than halfway through, a Louis L'Amour novel right now as I record this, Utah Blaine. I'm really enjoying it. Hoping to get to some other writers, not just L'Amour. It's not going to be all L'Amour all the time here on June on the Range this year, but I do like Louis L'Amour. I recommend, if you tried a Louis L'Amour novel in the past and you didn't really get on with it, thought it was a little too square or whatever, try his short stories. As you could tell from those synopses that I read, they're very different. Lots of different, a variety of tales. They all feature strong men and women fighting adversity and finding connection, maybe amidst all this adversity and struggle and strife of the frontier life, or other times where they were having adventures. So adventure with a capital A is usually what Louis L'Amour stories are all about. So if you want some good escapism, a guy who can really spin a yarn, a born storyteller, that's Louis L'Amour. So check these out. Thanks for watching. Please let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these short stories, if you have any of these short story collections by Louis L'Amour, or if you have some other writers that you recommend or that you're reading right now for June on the Range. I hope you're having a lot of fun with whatever you're reading for this event, and I will check you later in the next video. Take care.